All right. What is going on, everyone? I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited to talk to you all about Taylor Swift and what on earth she has to do with AI. And I'm just gonna be patient. I'm gonna wait for the AV guys to get our slides up. All right, there we go. So man, democratization, that is a mouthful, but it's the best word I could think of. Look, if any of you out there think that the universe does not work in mysterious ways, I want you to tell me how I pitched a talk about Taylor Swift 2 months ago, and today her new album just dropped. Just take a second to think about that. Like, how's the universe not completely crazy and mysterious? I mean, no, of course, it's not random. We're friends. We coordinated it. She's sweet. Thank you, Taylor. So, yeah, as Dimitri said, I'm Carter. My pronouns are he, him. I've got a job at JSWORLD, but separate from that, like, I have become a very huge generative AI nerd. But that is literally as of 3 to 4 months ago. Prior to 3 to 4 months ago, I had never touched AI, never touched OpenAI. I'd heard of ChatGPT. I thought it was kind of maybe a fad or something. And frankly, I don't know how many of you in the audience think that AI is kind of a fad, but maybe by the end of the talk, you'll feel slightly different. I hail from Seattle, Washington, full stack JavaScript developer, love JavaScript, love Node, love TypeScript, been doing it forever. I'm on social media. I'd ask you to follow me on Twitter, but I don't know, man, I think Twitter is like, kind of like, I talk to more and more people. I'm like, hey, are you on Twitter? And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's a smart decision. Good for you. But I'm old, so like, you know, I would still be on like live, you know, I don't know, like MySpace or something. It was still around. Anyway, and as Dom mentioned, when I'm not data stacksing, I'm Cascadia JSing. So if any of you don't have plans for later in June, we're going to have an awesome 2-day JavaScript conference in Seattle, Washington. It's a beautiful time of the year to come visit. Definitely feel free to check it out. It's going to be really, really fun. But what I want to talk to you about now is the democratization of AI. But before we talk about AI, I want to kind of go take a stroll through memory lane and just talk about the democratization of tech. So, you know, I don't know, I've got a lot of gray in my beard. I've just been in this industry for a really long time. And when you've been around long enough, you sort of see the same things happen over and over and over again. And me getting into AI, it kind of reminds me of stuff that's happened to me in my past. So I'm going to take you back all the way to 2002. I think some of you were maybe just born, but I was just out of college. I got my first job as a developer at this company based in Washington, D.C., because that's where I'm from. And we had we kind of landed one of the most amazing contracts in the world for a small little dev shop. We were contracted to build one of the first large-scale SMS applications in the world. So for those of you who are NFL nerds, for those of you who watched this Super Bowl, at halftime, everyone in America, in the United States of America, was prompted to vote for who they thought the MVP of the Super Bowl was by using their cell phone. This is like before iPhones existed, and just sending a text message to a phone number with like the name of whoever they thought the MVP was. And we were just a bunch of we were like 5 developers working at a small company, and we had to build the application that was going to receive all of this data, process the results, and sort of generate the answers that we would then send back to Fox, the broadcaster, so they could create some beautiful graphic for the game. And I'm completely not exaggerating. This is exactly what it looked like. Sorry, let me pay this off a little bit. So we were, dude, there's no cloud, there's no AWS. Are you kidding me? We were like in an office staring at servers, like absolutely sweating bullets that like our lives were gonna end, right? Like this thing was gonna fall over, things were gonna collapse, our careers are gonna be ruined. Like I couldn't enjoy the game, right? Because we're tailing our like Apache logs and our Tomcat logs, just waiting for like some 500 error to happen. So my point is that like, that's what it looked and felt like as a developer in 2002 to build like an SMS voting application. And you might be asking, Carter, what is this story relevant to? Why do you care? Why are you telling us this? Well, because then you can fast forward 10 years And this is a picture of my colleague at the time, John Gottfried. I used to work at a company called Twilio. Anyone in the crowd heard of Twilio? Okay, awesome. When I joined, nobody had heard of Twilio. I joined in 2012, and no one had heard of Twilio. But John and I worked at Twilio. This picture is from JSConf. I believe it was the one in 2012, obviously, but I think it was in Arizona. And John is demoing Twilio. And John, moreover than that, he's demoing a game of Pac-Man where you could call into a phone number and use the keys on your phone to literally make the Pac-Man go up, left, up, down, left, and right. And he wrote it in, I don't know, like 8 lines of code. And John didn't have any stress about oh my God, is this going to work? Oh my God, is my server going to melt, right? Because over the course of 10 years, Twilio took something that was complicated, brittle, hard to understand, hard to use. It required doing telephony and SMS wasn't just a technical problem, it was a business development problem. You had to sign contracts and make deposits. Twilio took all of that and democratized it. They made it so that any developer globally around the world could sign up for a free account, use an easy-to-use RESTful API, use helper libraries in all of their languages, and they could just do it, right? So that's an example of how tech just keeps getting democratized over and over and over again. And then, it keeps going, right? You live long enough and you just see it happen over and over again, right? AWS has made it completely turnkey to deploy code to the cloud that is just, whatever, super duper scalable, super reliable. I mean, at this point, AWS is almost it's almost like so many people have built even more easier to use things on top of AWS, right? But same with Stripe with payments, Google Maps. Can you imagine if someone had told me when I was a teenager that you would be able to have build apps that effortlessly included geolocation and real-time maps and traffic data? I just would have told you that that was science fiction, right? But they built it and they made it available as APIs to developers. Same with Alexa. I mean, the idea that you could learn a little bit of XML markup and you could build natural language voice powered applications at one point would have been considered completely absurd, but now we just take it for granted. It's this thing that it keeps happening, and all of us as developers benefit from this. So this is a picture of Netflix offering $1 million to anybody that could build a recommendation algorithm that was better than what they already had. Think about that. This is 2006, so a very well-funded company with, really brilliant engineers was hitting some kind of wall, and they're like, shit, we give up. Let's just offer a prize to somebody or a group of somebodies who could figure out a better way for us to make smart, relevant recommendations to the people watching movies. And that's what they needed to do. And if you go back to this time frame, the only companies or the only products that had what today we would consider laughably basic recommendation engines were legitimate large-scale tech companies with massive engineering teams and engineering organizations building their own proprietary in-house solutions to solve these problems. And this is back in 2006. But today, in the same way that we've seen this democratization of tech happen over and over, we're now seeing this democratization of AI. And look, let's not kid ourselves. It all started with OpenAI, right? OpenAI, people will tell you hey, people have been working on machine learning and AI for decades. Congratulations. OpenAI democratized it. OpenAI made it available to everyone as a nice RESTful API with Python clients and JavaScript clients, and they made it well documented, and they democratized it. They made it available for all developers to try and play with. That is the difference between research and actually shipping products. But it didn't end with OpenAI. A lot of these products that you're seeing on this chart, there is a completely new tool chain being built right now in the AI space that is taking different parts of what it takes to construct AI applications and sort of owning that narrow bit of the use case and making it easier and easier and easier for developers to construct these things. So nowadays, if you're building like real AI or generative AI applications, you're gonna touch a lot of these different parts of the AI toolchain, and you're gonna have a lot of choice, right? You're gonna have lots of choices in LLMs, lots of choices in orchestration. And this is a good thing. Like this competition between all of these vendors is gonna make it going to create better products for developers to use, and frankly, cheaper products. So anyway, a little bit of, that's the historical preamble, but like what on earth does this have to do with Taylor Swift? That's a very good question. So I joined DataStax maybe at the end of November, however long ago that was. I still feel very new. In developer relations, like one of the things that I really try to do is figure out, like, look, like we're a database company, right? Databases, you can kind of do anything with a database. So like one of the things that's fun about DevRel is like, what are some fun things that we can build that like illustrate how our technologies work and how our technology works with other technologies, but it's fun. It's like stuff that people can relate to. It's just, and anyway, so like I have young kids, and I think in a random like meeting, I suggested like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we built a Taylor Swift chatbot, right? If you're old enough, you kind of remember like old web page. This is before social media. Like people would construct really elaborate fan web pages that were like almost encyclopedias for like their favorite band or their favorite actor or actress or whatever. So I was kind of thinking like, what's the chatbot equivalent of like a Taylor Swift fan site? I just thought that this would be something that people would relate to and that people would get a kick out of. And unbeknownst to me, someone on the team said like, Carter, that's an unbelievably brilliant idea. Guess what? Taylor Swift's birthday is in 1 week. Can we build it and ship it in 1 week? And then we'll launch it on her birthday? And I like completely lost, I mean, I was silent, I was visibly silent, but like I like kind of lost my mind like on the inside because like I couldn't, because everyone was staring at me and they were expecting me like, yeah, you said this is pretty easy, like we can just ship this in a week, right? And I started to kind of get really scared and lose my mind. But anyway, me and other folks at the company, we put our heads together, and sure enough, in a week, we shipped SwiftieGPT. And it took us, and you can kind of look at the commit, it's all on GitHub, and you can look at the commits. Like the bulk of it was built and shipped within a week. And I really, like for the remainder of the talk, I just want to walk you through like how we did it. And if you leave this talk with anything, I want you to leave with the idea that AI isn't as hard as you think it is. It's really, really easy to do really simple things. And for sure, I know that this is a silly example, but it's actually closer to what you'll build in real life than you think. And the tooling just keeps getting better and better. So in order to talk about what I'm building, I need to talk about something called retrieval augmented generation. Raise your hand if you not only know what this acronym means, but you've actually like built applications that use it. Awesome, thank you so much. So like 95% of you didn't raise your hands. And that makes me my heart glow, because otherwise this talk would have been a huge waste of time. So let's talk about retrieval augmented generation. And I don't want to like dig into like what the stupid acronym means. I just want to dig into like what each word means. So let's talk about generation. So I'm going to switch over. By the way, I hate slides, so I'm happy to be in code. I want to switch over to generation. So I've got my this is a Next.js application, so it should be very familiar to most of you here. And this is the Taylor Swift application. But I'm going to start to cripple my Taylor Swift application because I want to go through retrieval augmented generation one step at a time, so that by the end of it, I hope that you have an understanding of like why RAG is useful and why it's interesting. So I'm going to, I hope everybody can see this for the most part. Here in this call, this is the call to OpenAI. And what's most important about the call to OpenAI is the passing of this template parameter. Right now, this template parameter has like all these instructions that I'll go into in a little bit. Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and hide the side. All these instructions for OpenAI, but I'm going to get rid of them. I'm basically going to give OpenAI like almost like no information about what kind of application I'm building or what it's for, and you'll see why in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And Next.js should have just reloaded, hot reloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page. So I'm going to ask a question that should have like a factual answer that is correct. Who is she dating? Does anyone know the answer to this question? Who Taylor Swift is dating? No? OK, I do. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, OK. So look. What has happened is I have crippled my application. This is now just ChatGPT. In fact, I can kind of prove it. Like, who are you? Oops, no question mark. That's OK. You know, hey, basically the response is like, I'm just ChatGPT, Carter. So great. Like I've written, you know, I've got a bunch of like Next.js code that is effectively just returning the responses of raw ChatGPT. But this is useful to know. Like if you ever want to wrap ChatGPT, like provide your own custom UI, you can do it with just a few lines of code around your application. But that's pretty boring. So that brings me to the next thing that I want to talk to you about, which is augmentation. Right? So that's generation. That's just ChatGPT or any LLM doing what it does. So let's talk about augmentation. What does that mean? Well, first of all, none of these things are like in dictionaries or like, you know, everyone has their own opinions. To me, augmentation is this thing right here. It's the prompt. It's me telling the LLM, it's me telling it who it is, what its purpose is, and giving it instructions. So in this case, I'm saying you are an AI assistant who is a Taylor Swift superfan. Use the below context to augment what you know about Taylor Swift. Now there's this thing down here, there's the reference to this thing called context. I'm actually going to temporarily null out the context. And I think you'll see why in a second. But we're going to keep everything else. So like I'm telling the LLM it's a super fan. I'm telling it that it knows everything about Taylor Swift. I'm telling it not to talk about certain things, right? If the context doesn't include the information you need to answer based on your existing knowledge, and don't mention the source of your information. So I am training this LLM to provide the kind of answers that I want it to provide for my users. So this is what I consider augmentation to be. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's go ask the exact same questions. Who is she dating? Let's see what the answer is. So see now the LLM knows a bunch of things. It knows several things. It knows that when I said she, I'm talking about Taylor Swift. And it knows that because I gave it that information in the prompt. However, it erroneously thinks that Taylor Swift is dating British actor Joe Alwyn. I don't know who that guy is, but I wonder if he kind of feels shitty right now. He had quite a catch. I don't know what happened. And the reason that this is that OpenAI and every LLM you use, no matter what anybody tells you, is trained on data that has an end date. Even today, if you use ChatGPT, you can hook it up to things like Bing or other sources in order to get updated information, but that's actually what you're seeing is RAG. What you're seeing is this retrieval augmented generation technique. When you interact with LLMs without this augmentation of external data, it simply cannot know anything that it wasn't trained on. So, but it's not totally useless. Like, who are you? So, and it's gonna say something, nice about being a Taylor Swift superfan. Interesting. Oh well, I don't know why I didn't answer more accurately, but that's one of the non-deterministic things about building chatbots. Anyway, but still, like this is not what we want, and this is not what we built. So going back to here, And you can go a long way with augmentation, by the way, right? I mean, like the fact that OpenAI and like Llama 3 and like these LLMs have scraped the entirety of the internet and indexed it and understand it, like there's a lot of value that developers can build just using a little bit of prompt engineering and a little bit of augmentation. But in this case, like I am trying very specifically to build a chatbot that knows everything about Taylor Swift. And in the real world, I want you to visualize like an iceberg, that classic picture of an iceberg where, there's like a little bit of iceberg above the water, but then there's this massive thing underneath. Like that's like the data in the world. Like the data that can be indexed and like crawled by OpenAI or Google is that little bit of the iceberg above the water. All the data that exists, like in terms of scale, is below the water. This is like the data that's just inside of your companies or inside of your enterprises, or just isn't crawlable or isn't indexable. Like this is the data that you all have some level of access to depending on where you work or what you do. And this is the data that you can use to build like these better AI experiences. So let's talk about retrieval. So here in this, this load file, what I'm doing is I am going to scrape all of these web pages. And I'm going to scrape these web pages, and I'm going to use Puppeteer to load the content from the web pages. And then I'm going to use a tool called LangChain to sort of like load all of the content from these web pages into a pipeline. And then I'm going to take this textual content and I'm going to break it up into chunks. You can see right here, this is me using LangChain to basically specify that I want each chunk to be 512 characters long, and I want there to be 100 characters of overlap in between the chunks. Like this stuff might seem confusing and arbitrary, but like the more coding that you do in this space, there's a method to the madness, right? Like you don't want to take an entire web page and try to generate a vector embedding for it. You want to break it up into chunks. Once I've broken up these web pages into chunks, I'm going to run them through an LLM. In this case, I'm going to use OpenAI, and I'm going to use their text embedding 3 small model. The easiest way for me to sort of describe like these vector embeddings, just imagine taking the word dog and taking the word cat, running them through a large language model, and generating 2 points that are very close to each other. And then imagine taking the word truck, running it through the exact same language model, and it will generate a point that is far away from cat and dog. That's what large language models do. Like large language models don't care what letters there are, or like, large language models understand the meaning of the words that you pass them, and they generate these really, really long arrays of floating point values that represent points in this n-dimensional space, and concepts and words and sentences that are similar get clustered, and then things that are very dissimilar are very far apart. And I'll show you exactly how this is useful right now. So I'm going to, once we have taken all the content of these web pages, broken them up into chunks, used OpenAI to generate vector embeddings for these chunks, we store them in something called a vector database. So I work at DataStax. We have a vector database called AstraDB. And I can go over here, and this is what the portal for AstraDB looks like. So I've got a database called SwiftieGPT. I've got a collection called Swiftopedia. And in that collection, I have all of these documents. And they're just JSON documents. AstraDB is like it's a NoSQL database, so you can store like unstructured data in it. So this is all the content that we're storing, and you can see here this is all the content that's being broken apart, and then these are the vectors that are being generated for each of these chunks. So I'm going to go back to my code, and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to sort of like put it back together the way it was originally, which means I'm going to get rid of this nulling of doc context. So the UI part of it is the reason I'm using Next.js is that this UI is actually built on top of Vercel's AI SDK. You can actually use the Vercel AI SDK with other frameworks besides Next, but it's very convenient to use Next. And when you enter a message into the chatbot, it is going to get turned into a vector, and then that vector is going to get passed into this route. The route is going to be used to query our vector database right here. So we're going to execute a find on our vector database, passing the vector, and we're going to look for the top 10 documents that match. So let's go ahead and run our app, and if it answers correctly, I'd love some applause because live demoing is hard. So who is she dating? Yes! So the reason this worked is that my question was converted into a vector. We did a vector search to retrieve the chunks that matched closest to the question that I asked, and within those chunks were basically the contents to the answer to the question. So if you go here to this prompt, all of that context gets injected right here and passed to OpenAI. And the funny thing is, it's kind of like a big tangle of words, to be honest, and it's kind of magical how OpenAI can tease that apart and like come up with like a real logical answer. So that's pretty much it. Like, I hope that you all have a sort of a clear understanding of like what retrieval augmented generation is, and I hope that you understand like that it's something that you can totally do, and you can totally do it today. Here are some resources for you and for JavaScript devs in the audience. AstraDB comes with a really awesome TypeScript client. We actually launched integration with Vercel just this week. Like I think just a couple of days ago. So now if you're a Vercel user, inside of the Vercel experience, you can create databases and you can wire them up to your Vercel or your Next.js projects, and all of the environment variables for those projects will get preloaded with the API keys that you need to use to connect to AstraDB. And besides the TypeScript client, for those of you in the audience that are already using Mongoose as a client, as an ORM for your applications, our AstraDB is fully compatible with Mongoose. You just need to sort of edit a little configuration when you initialize your client. Anyway, that's all my time. I just want to thank Michelle and all the organizers from React Miami. Can we give them a huge round of applause? They're just so amazing. I was telling folks last night at the party that part of my joy as an organizer is to meet amazing people and then to see what those amazing people go on to do. And I remember meeting Michelle like just a few years ago before this conference ever existed. And it's just a real joy to my heart to see what she and all the other organizers have done. So, you know, that's it for me. Happy hacking, everybody, and thank you so much.